This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 237, Off the Cuff, Layout Builder, Custom Entities, and Drupal 9. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we talk about a few things on our minds, including Drupal 9's release, Layout Builder, and last but not least, custom entities. First, let's catch up with everyone. Nick, what's new with you?
Good afternoon, everybody. We're recording this on a different day than usual, so it's a little bit interesting whenever we change our schedule. Last couple of weeks, haven't been doing too much around the house. I've actually been enjoying, there's a game for Switch called Mario Maker, and it lets you make your own Mario levels. It's a lot of fun. And you get to play other people's levels. You can choose a bunch of different styles. There's new Super Mario Brothers. There's the original Super Mario and Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. And so I've been having some fun with that. I put together a level maybe a week ago that's pretty difficult. I don't know if any of our listeners play Mario Maker. We'll share the code. I think there's 300 attempts and nobody's beat it, so it's a pretty tough level.
So there's no validation once you build the level that goes through and sees if it can be beaten.
There actually is a validation. It's actually pretty clever. So you can set checkpoints, and so this particular level has 2 checkpoints. So if you make a certain amount of progress, you hit that midway, and you die, you start from the midway. You don't have to start from the beginning. And before you're allowed to upload your level, you have to do what's called a clear check, which means you need to beat it from the beginning without dying, and you need to beat it from every single checkpoint without dying. This particular level took me almost an hour.
So it's not automated. You actually have to do it yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that makes the most sense because, it proves that the level's beatable. One thing that people will do though, is they will make an impossible level and then just have a hidden door somewhere that allows them to beat it, without going through the level. Yeah, but you can find those too. And those levels pretty quickly get, there's a voting system, you can like something or boo it. And those pretty quickly get booed out of existence.
Downvote.
Yeah, essentially. It's a lot of fun. There's an offline game too you can play, I think, although I've only built levels and played others levels.
And so Nick, how long have you had a Switch?
I've had a Switch, I think, for 3 years now.
Oh, wow.
2.5, 3 years. Yeah, I spend most of my time with this. There's my wife and I play a battle royale Tetris game. So it's you playing Tetris against 99 other people.
Oh,
and
come on.
You can send people extra blocks depending on how fast you clear stuff. And it gets faster and faster. It's really difficult. But we usually
I'm actually pretty sure the most surprising thing to me is that Nick has something in his house that's connecting online, that he's interacting with other people, and it hasn't gone do some sort of security thing where Nick doesn't allow it.
So that doesn't actually, surprise me because, Nick needs some interaction to the outside world. So that seems perfect. That seems like a perfect mechanism to me.
It seems to me you need to get in his house in order to interact with him online.
No, that's just sketchy, Chinese Internet of Things equipment that I quarantine. Things like
no,
Switch
not the Switch. No,
come on, everybody.
Switch is on the normal Wi-Fi.
Okay,
Steven, what's new in your world?
My world is so, as you know, it's kind of like our world. I've been spending some time trying to get these YouTube videos up and going through a crash course in editing video. Last Sunday, I spent about 3.5 hours trying to edit last week's show in a new way. And if you look at it online, I don't think it looks any different than any of them in the past because I wasn't able to succeed, but I'm getting closer. So the goal is like when the intro's going on, that box that like John just did the intro, that box zooms in and it's just that person speaking. And then as the intro ends, it kind of zooms into the rest of everyone else. So I finally got it working on Monday, but I had to get the show out. So I put up the uninspired version for everyone to see, but we're still working on that. So it's been fun learning the software Lightworks that I've been using. So I've been tinkering with that a little bit every day. So some point down the road, we might have a pretty cool looking YouTube show, but for now, you just got our faces in 3 boxes. That's kind of it for me. What about you, John?
Well, you also put it up on Library too, right?
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yeah, I did. So Library is a YouTube open source product. And our shows are syncing over there now. Nick, did you get a chance to look at it? Check out Library a little bit?
I played around with it. It looks like a really cool alternative, like open source.
And that's LBRY, right? It's not
exactly.
actually the word library for anybody that's trying to look for it.
Yeah. And it works on this like Bitcoin kind of thing where you get this digital payments for watching and people tipping you, and there's like a payment structure there, but it's not ads. So I haven't quite figured out how all that works yet, but it's just another way.
Do you know what kind of coin it's based on?
It's based on their own coin.
Interesting.
It's like library coin or something.
We should have a show about Bitcoin. I've gotten into the world of cryptocurrencies.
Okay.
And anyway, that's beside the point.
Yeah.
As Nick was saying, we're recording on a different day, and that's because I was taking some time off. I went to New York last weekend, and then my wife and I went to New York, and then my wife and I took our kids to Boston, and we just, we did some interesting things. My wife and I had never been to the Statue of Liberty. So we went, and we were in New York. So we took a day and we went to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, which was super interesting. And then in Boston, we went to the Children's Museum, the aquarium, and Legoland. So, it was just, it was fun to take some time off and do some things that I hadn't done before, and just get out and see the world.
Okay, John, got 4 hours to kill time in Boston. What do you recommend doing?
4 hours in Boston. Do you have kids with you, or you just no? So if you're there for a meal, something that's interesting to check out is in the Prudential, there is a place called Italy. And it's essentially like an Italian market, open air market. But they also have a restaurant inside, so you could sit down and have lunch or dinner or whatever if you wanted to. That's pretty fun. The Boston Common is pretty great if it's a nice day to go for a walk. And then, if you're into Legos, you could check out Legoland, but if you don't have kids with you, it's probably not going to be.
Is that a store?
So it's a combination. It's a discovery center, so it's not like the Legoland amusement park 100%, but it does have a store on the first floor, and then on the second floor it has activities for kids and a couple of rides that you can go on.
Where is it?
It's in Somerville, so it's just outside of Boston, about 10 minutes.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll be in Boston tomorrow, so looking for advice on some things to kill some time.
Yeah, are you going to be near South Station, or are you driving in, or what are you doing?
I'm driving in. My daughter's flying home from a trip, so we're gonna visit her when she gets off the airport before she heads back to New Hampshire. So
got it. Yeah,
I think we're gonna head up in the morning and spend 3 or 4 hours doing something.
I would definitely check out Italy. If you're there for breakfast time, there's a great bakery on Farnsworth Street called Flour. We actually ate there twice while we were in Boston. Super good. I recommend it highly.
Awesome.
So moving on to some stories of the week. Nick, can you give us a brief history of Drush?
Yeah. So with Drupal 9 coming out soon, I think there's a new version of Drush coming out soon as well. So Drush 10 is right around the corner. And Preston So wrote an article for Tag One Consulting talking about the history of Drush, going through each version, version 0 all the way through the current version, which is 9, and just a little bit of history. One of the things that really stood out to me that I completely forgot about was Drush started out as a module. And it was one of the first, I think, Drupal related projects that kind of cut off its own track and went to GitHub and started its own development cycle. And it's a decent read. I think it's a good article to take a look at if you're interested in where Drush came from and why it was created.
There's also another good article. It's actually a video that I want to recommend people take a look at. If you haven't gotten into Drupal 8 Media yet, the core media module and what it does, WebWash, if you're not familiar with that, check out, do a Google search on Drupal WebWash. It's a video series from Ivan. He puts out great videos. He has some training classes as well, but he just recently released an updated version of his media video. I think it's about an hour and 15 minutes long, and it walks you through how to use media in core. For someone to just get up to speed really quickly, he's a great instructor. I actually watched his previous version of this video, I think was almost 2 years old. I watched it about a month ago. And then recently an update came out. So it's really worth taking a look at. And the link to that will be in our show notes.
Cool. And I think the last story here, it's from, I believe it's ADC Solutions, and it's talking about accessibility. And I think, obviously Oomph has been, really working on a lot of accessibility and trying to get the word out about how important accessibility is. And I think everybody is aware, but this article does a really great job of kind of explaining kind of the business case for accessibility and why it's important, as well as who it's for and ways that you can make your site more accessible. So it's kind of if you haven't jumped into the accessibility pool yet, it's kind of a good intro as to why you might want to do that and how you can get started.
I would say that the hardest thing about accessibility is remembering if A or AAA compliance is the hardest. I can never remember which one is
1A or 3A's.
I can never remember.
I couldn't tell if that was a joke or not. I was like, wait, is that some sort of accessibility joke that I'm not aware of? Like, yeah. I mean, I think that's
the grading system's not very accessible for me.
So to be fair, it's a good point that you bring up is knowing, like, if you're going to tackle accessibility, right, it's good to know what level you need to be at. Sometimes companies have corporate edict that says, hey, you need to be at this level of accessibility, and sometimes people are defining their own. They don't have a policy in place. So that's a good first step, to see how accessible you need to be and which one of those requirements you need to meet.
And if you believe that accessibility is important and you're trying to convince either your colleagues or your customers the importance of it, this article is really good at pointing out the key points to bring up in that discussion.
And if you need help, feel free, shameless plug, to reach out to us at Oomph. We're doing accessibility trainings and consulting all the time. So we're happy to help. Let's move on to our primary topic. And the first one is, something I actually saw a blog post from Third and Grove titled, when will Drupal 9 be ready? So for quite a while now, everybody has been focusing on, the June release date for Drupal 9. And more recently, we've been starting to hear some grumblings that Drupal 9 might not be ready for that date, which we'll talk about that in just a second. But if you read the article, it talks about kind of the release schedule for Drupal that they've been keeping up with, but it talks about also what the requirements are for Drupal 9 to be ready to be released in June. And if it's not ready, what the alternate release dates would be, which I think they were August and then either November or December. But my question here, and this is kind of a question for you guys, is are you worried? Does that worry you if Drupal 9, isn't ready for June? I mean, I think we've all been kind of beating the drum that, hey, Drupal 9 is going to be coming out in June. We need to get ready for this. What if it's not there? What do we do?
If it's not ready, why would I need to worry about it?
Well, I mean, you may not. I mean, you could very easily stay at Drupal 8. Drupal 8's still obviously gonna work for you, but
my point is, if it's not ready, it's not getting released, right? So there's nothing for me to worry about. The worry comes if Drupal 9 actually comes out, but there's nothing updated to support it.
True.
Right.
True. I just wonder if it's, we've put all of this promotion into the fact that Drupal's on a release schedule now, and you can, we're releasing these new features, and we're counting on new versions at these certain intervals, right? If we miss this major release that's been ported as a easy upgrade from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, is that going to be bad for Drupal? Is that going to be detrimental to, people upgrading to Drupal 9, people's, faith in the Drupal platform?
Well, I mean, I have a few opinions about this. I mean, the first thing is, you can already see that it's a smaller change than going from 7 to 8. And the new pathway for Drupal's kind of release schedule has been an awesome thing. I'm honestly not concerned whatsoever from this June release date. Even if it does come out, I'm not planning on updating any of my clients from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 for at least 3 to 6 months. Drupal 8 is what?
I'm just going to say, I get that. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like June, I'm going to run out and update all of our Drupal sites. Like, that's definitely not going to be the case. But what concerns me a little bit here is that if, let's say Drupal 9 launches in June, okay, it's out, it's in the world. Now module maintainers are looking at it like, oh, I have to go update my module now for Drupal 9. I have to make sure it's supported. Like, and there's a ramp up period there, right? So if that happens in June, great. Maybe by the end of the year, like, all the modules that I need to build a site or have that I have on current sites are ready to go, and we can start making those upgrades. If it's pushed out to November, September, or even December, right, then that window gets pushed out even further, and now all of the kind of work that we've done around Drupal 9 readiness and all that stuff is, it's still valid, but it's just now we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to get people onto Drupal 9.
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern. I mean, honestly, I'm more concerned about the end of life, which is the following November. So November, I think 2021. Is that correct?
Right.
That's the date that I'm more concerned about. So if the Drupal 9 release gets delayed by 6 months and goes out when Drupal 8.10 goes out instead, I'm not really worried about that. 11 months, I think, based on what I've been viewing, is enough time to update most of the major non-core modules. There's a couple that will be more complex, but most of them you're just removing some deprecated code. Switch, most of them are just, changing things over to use services instead of a one-off function. And I don't really, that doesn't concern me too much.
Have either of you run upgrade status on your Drupal 8 sites to see how many modules need work done?
I just installed it 2 days ago. Haven't run the report yet.
It's interesting.
Scary, yeah.
I think a lot of the site that I did run it on, a lot of the custom modules, the only change was in the .info file was changing the version or updating the version parameter to be Drupal 8, Drupal 9. But there were some that had some functions in them that needed to be, Drupal set message and stuff like that needed to be replaced. But the contrib space, there were a lot of things that were pretty integral to some of the sites that we're running. And
what kind of modules are you talking about are problematic?
I'm not gonna specifically call out any modules because I can't remember off the top of my head what they were. I just remember the number of warnings and errors that I got were like close to 400 or 500. So it was like, it wasn't like a small number of like, oh, it's like one fix here, one fix there. It was like, hey, there are like 25 issues that need to be resolved in this module before it'll be ready for Drupal 9. So with your point, Nick, right, with Drupal 7 end of life, right? So the idea would be like, hey, Drupal 9 comes out in June. If we were to port your site or upgrade your site, rebuild your site, if you will, from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9, like we could do that between, June and whatever the end of life is for Drupal 7, which I believe is November 2021, right? That sounds right. But now, if that Drupal 9 launch gets pushed, that window is getting a lot smaller. So I mean, what do you tell people? Oh, you're on a Drupal 7 site. Yeah, I know you were waiting for Drupal 9. Well, now you can just go to 8 and then have to upgrade your 8 site to your 9 site. Like that's your path forward. It's not, in my opinion, it's not great. I mean, it is a path forward, but it's not ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that concern. I also think I think it's something worth taking a look at and planning for, like an eventuality. But I also think realistically, let's look at the worst case scenario. That's how you plan, right? Let's say Drupal 9 isn't ready until next November when we're forced to do it because Symfony is deprecating the older version. Realistically, Drupal 8 people would support Symfony. Part of the Drupal community would just support that temporarily until Drupal 9 is ready. I'm not convinced that if Drupal 9 goes away, Drupal 8 is just going to stop working the next day. So, I mean, I think we have plenty of time. I'm not super concerned with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a doom and gloom scenario, right? Your Drupal site's not just going to stop working. It's nothing like that. I just think from a timing standpoint, and for people that could be looking at waiting on their Drupal 7 upgrade for Drupal 9 to be released, like the window is going to get a lot smaller for them.
And just for those listening, that was Nick's dog, very thirsty, by the way.
Sometimes he just decides it's time to drink a whole bowl of water, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Nope, just let him drink. That's fine. Hey, there's 2 Drupal camps coming up in March we wanted to let you know about. One of them is the 7th annual Midwest Drupal Mid Camp. This year, it's March 18th through 21st at DePaul University Lincoln Park campus in Chicago. Midcamp brings together Drupal developers, designers, users, and evaluators for 4 days of sessions, training, sprints, and socials. Regular tickets are available through the end of February. So by the time this comes out, you only have a few days left to get that discounted ticket. There's still sponsorship opportunities open for you to promote your business, recruit top Drupal talent, and support the community. You can visit midcamp.org for more details. And keep in mind, this year, this camp is during St. Patrick's Day. So go to Chicago, check out the river dying, and stay for the community.
Yeah, the second camp is the Nerd Summit happening in Amherst, Massachusetts on March 20th through the 22nd. Over 300 tech professionals will descend on UMass Amherst for Nerd Summit. Now in its seventh year, UMass is beautiful at this time of year. Nerd Summit fosters learning and sharing between tech professionals, including developers of all sorts, business analysts, project managers, quality assurance testers, UI and UX designers, system architects, and more. The 3-day Nerd Summit has something for everyone, from beginners of all ages to advanced professionals. Friday and Saturday will include more than 50 presentations. Sunday offers anyone ages 8 and up an all-day opportunity to learn and or practice real-world programming in a group setting at the free Nerd 2020 Hackathon. For more details, visit nerdsummit.org. All right. So moving on with our topics. Nick, you want to talk about Layout Builder?
Yeah. So Layout Builder was talked about quite a bit before it's released last year. I think last June. And I finally have a project that's kind of in its infancy and looking to kind of get started. So I think it makes sense, based on all the research I've been doing and talking to people and playing with Layout Builder, that Layout Builder is the way of the future. For a period of a couple of years, paragraphs were used heavily to help give content editors some semblance of control over the layout of their page. And I don't think that that's going to be necessary anymore. Layout Builder, I think, is really kind of going to revolutionize how content editors control. So now that I've got the first project working with it, I'm actually starting to deal with some of the issues and figure out, how to integrate it into a real world project. My first impressions are pretty fantastic. I mean, it seems out of the box. As an advanced Drupal user, it's very easy and intuitive, I think, to use and to utilize. There are a couple things that are very different, though. One of the first things that's really weird is, you're used to having all the fields on the node edit page. And it's a little bit weird to create a title for a page and then have to save it and then go to the layout page to add components. That was kind of the first thing. You just have to get used to going to a different tab to control the layout. And that of course is when you're allowing the content editor to change the layout for an individual content type. The second thing, the first challenge that I think I ran into content-wise, though, is what to do with things like teasers. So typically, with a content type, you'll have, some teaser information. You'll have an image. You'll grab the body and truncate it sometimes. And so I was trying to figure out how best to handle views that pull in teaser information for a node that's using Layout Builder. And I think, the solution that I came up with works in my situation. I just added those fields directly to the node. So I just added custom teaser fields specifically for that node. So, a short description, maybe an image or two. And then that way I can deal with the teaser the same exact way I would in the past. You just build a view, and just tell it to pull the teaser field in, and I'll put it and then link it directly to the page.
So once you turn on Layout Builder, you do not have access to the view modes that you would have out of Core.
You can have access to those as well.
Okay. So why wouldn't you
in addition?
So why wouldn't you just use the teaser that you had in like Drupal core, the display mode for teaser? I guess.
Well, the issue
because
is
he likes to pull his own fields into his views.
Okay.
Yeah, like you,
right.
like typically, exactly. Like there's no generally, there's less fields on the actual content type when you're using Layout Builder, because Layout Builder allows you to build the sections and then you're using blocks to actually put content in there. So you would have like an image block or a text block. And so you don't know, for example, in every case that there's going to be a text block on the page to pull the teaser from, because the content editor might create a page that just has 2 images. So instead I put those fields directly on the content type, and then we can just pull them in.
I mean, there are a million different ways you could build that, right? So I'm thinking, like, why not use the body summary field as your teaser description, as opposed to,
well, I mean, that's kind of the same solution. I'm using a field directly on the content type, whether it's a summary in a body or a custom field.
Nick, it's fine. It's Drupal. There are
Either
about
way.
50 ways to do everything.
Exactly. One thing that I think might turn out to be problematic until there's a way to, I think some contrib space really needs to be built up around this to really make it very straightforward. There's no way to build your own layouts without using code that I've seen. You need to you can either put a plugin or you can use YAML to identify them. You do need to have a custom module to build your own layouts. Mm-hmm. I found that there's a need for a lot of customization as well.
Do you actually need to have your own module, or can you build layouts into your theme? Because you can. I thought you could define different layouts within your theme, some of your theme files.
You probably can. I mean, themes are essentially specialty modules.
Right.
But either way, you're still building. You're building a content, a configuration artifact.
Right. It does still require code of some sort. Absolutely.
Correct. And I find that the interface, while it's fairly straightforward for a developer, there's a lot of white noise. I mean, when you first enable it, you can add any block. There's like 200 options on a base thing. Mm-hmm. I was actually in Nate Denzau's NedCamp talk last year. I would highly recommend giving that presentation a view if you're going to be using Layout Builder. And
we'll put the link in the show notes.
We will. I actually used a bunch of his recommendations on how to filter the available blocks list. And one of the great things about Layout Builder is that it's very easy to configure. Or add customizations. So for example, I hid all the default layouts that Drupal provides and created my own 2 layouts. And then I was able to attach a few specific fields to them. So the idea behind this particular project is it's a learning site. And so each layout section is a learning section. And when somebody completes it, it needs to store their progress. And so I was able to create a section unique identifier and a button. And when so no matter what content they put in their section, every section will have a button that has some AJAX attached to it. So if somebody hits the button, it then stores that information so that we know that, hey, this user completed this section. And one of the really interesting things I'm finding is, there's been a lot of talk about Layout Builder killing paragraphs. And I'm actually finding that that's not the case.
Killing's not necessarily the right word, right? And I'm sure this is where you're going with this. It's more of like changing the way that you use paragraphs, right?
Absolutely. In my case, I'm still using paragraphs to actually store that data. So I'm finding that if there's data that I need to store that doesn't make sense as a node or something, I'm using paragraphs. So in my case, I have it a setup that when you hit the button for that section, it creates a new paragraph storing the user, the time, in which section that they completed, because paragraphs is a very easy way to create an entity that stores some information that doesn't have all the overhead of a node.
Stay
So
tuned.
it's like layout builder is the new paragraphs, and paragraphs is the new field collections.
Sort of. I mean, I think, yeah, sort of. Except, paragraphs always was field collections, just using the entity API. But yeah, I think it's definitely a new way of thinking. The only kind of two things that are still on my mind of how to handle that I haven't figured out, and I honestly don't think I'll run into that issue on this particular site. But the two big questions I have are: one, how do you interact with content programmatically? Generally, on a content type, even with a paragraph, it's very easy to dive in and say, hey, I need to check a value on a particular field and do something based on that. With Layout Builder, though, content is stored as a hash. And so I've not even looked at how, like, I don't even know if it's easy to see, for example, hey, this particular block is on this page and look at this field and then interact with it. I have a feeling it's not going to work exactly the same and will probably result in some complexity programmatically responding to content entered on a page. But, that's something that I think the benefits far outweigh some added complexity there.
And Nick, based on what you've seen, there are no like setters and getters in the layout builder module to be able to like go pull that information and do a comparison on
it. There's got to be. Again, it's not something I've needed for this project. It's just something that I've looked at. Like, it's not an entity reference. It's a content hash.
I haven't done much with layout builder yet, other than playing with it at a high level. We're just putting it into a project now. But when you look at how is it storing the data underneath? It's not an entity.
It's a content hash.
Oh, okay.
Because essentially the content stored in a block, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it has to be stored somehow because it knows which blocks. To hash.
And like I said, and there has to be an API to retrieve the content.
Yeah.
In a structured
way.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And so it's not that I think it will be impossible, or it may not even be particularly difficult. It's just different than
what I haven't done it yet either, right?
And I haven't had to do it yet. Right. The other thing, and I'm less concerned about this because it's another core kind of thing, is translation. I don't know how translation will work. I think all of us have the most experience with one particular translation vendor. And I know that they sometimes have difficulty with entity references and showing that there's changes. I have no idea how that will interact with, because it's one thing to translate the content. It's another thing to use a service to translate content. People sometimes conflate those two. I have no idea how that will interact here.
John, have you done any translation with Layout Builder yet?
I haven't, but I have heard that it will translate. I have also heard that if you're looking to translate some of the, I think, admin of Layout Builder, it doesn't work as well as it should, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, content hashes and translation scare me.
Yeah,
Concept of that,
I'm mildly concerned about that, but
right.
I mean, so if the content if the content can get into the Drupal content or the Drupal translation system, then whatever service you're using
Doesn't matter,
should
right?
be
Yeah,
able to translate it without a
right.
problem.
So it's not. It shouldn't be a vendor issue, right?
Shouldn't be a vendor
Should be a
issue.
core issue.
Could be a core issue,
Right.
but I'm also kind of feeling that it's probably looking at a version of the content that's kind
well,
of
I
built
mean,
out.
But so whatever listeners are out there and have done this, let us know that this works great, and we
I'd
can
be very curious.
You could appear on the next Talking Drupal.
exactly.
And so I briefly mentioned, the changing scope of paragraph and how it's becoming more of a way for me to store information in an entity. And John kind of pointed out that might be a bit of a segue. So what's another way of storing data in Drupal that's not using a taxonomy or a content type?
So I've been wanting to play with this for a while and only tinkered with it. And just recently had an opportunity to look at this in more detail, which is creating a custom entity and why I would want to do it. And Nick, the thing you just pointed out, that using paragraphs to store content in an easy way is like exactly what a custom entity is for. So in Drupal 8, you can super easily create a custom entity. So why you'd want to do that? You'd want to do it to get rid of a lot of the overhead. If you think of so in the past when I've needed to track things like maybe activity data or transactional data, I'll create a content type and I'll put the fields in there. But there's a lot of overhead with stuff that you don't need, like
menus, paths.
Yeah, menus, paths, content, maybe revisions. You don't need any of that stuff. So if you build a custom entity, you can define it in a way that you do or don't want translation, you do or don't want revisions, you don't need comments, and those things you can get away from. So an example in the piece that I used it for was I was building a module, not a Drupal module, but a section of a website where we wanted to track recent media that someone was looking at. So if you picture a media browser, you want to have some very good detail about what is the last 15 things that I looked at, so I could go back to them very easily. So a way to do that would be, in the past, I might have created a content type, put in a hook, and I was like generating this data. It's like a lot of data and a lot of overhead. So if you do it with a custom content type, you can define the content type and just say, all I want in this custom entity is the user ID that I'm on, the media ID that I'm connecting to, and the current date and time. And that's all I need. So if you create a custom entity and if you go look at the database, it actually builds a table with just those fields in it, nothing else. So you don't have these relational fields where you got like a field tables and all that stuff. It's like a flat SQL table with just the fields that you want in it. And the beauty of it is it's built with the entity API, so the rest of the stuff in Drupal works. So you can use that data in a view, put it in a view, you can relate it to other stuff, and it is super, super fast.
I also imagine it's super updatable too. So like if you were to build a module that created a custom entity, right? And then you needed to change that entity, add a field, remove a field, so on and so forth. That's kind of like a known quantity to you, right? You know what to expect. You know how you can update it, as opposed to if you create a content type, you don't know if a user's added something to that or removed something. Granted, it should be saved in config, but you're expecting one thing and you could be getting something else. With custom entity, you don't have that concern, right?
Yeah.
So I'm this is actually a debate that I'm having internally about this specific project. I know I'm considering converting the 2 paragraphs that I have in that project to a custom entity for the reasons that you just mentioned, Stephen. But one thing I'm thinking about is maintainability as well. Like I'd have to like paragraphs are kind of every Drupal 8 site has paragraphs at this point. Whereas a custom entity, I'd have to remember if I'm working this project down the road or another developer takes over, they'd have to find that in the custom modules that that there's a custom entity built, and then kind of parse from there what it's being used for.
But also when you set it up, you can say, I want it to be seen from the UI, admin UI. So if you go into the admin UI and you click structure, you can see it listed there. It's like
really? I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's a feature you can add in. And a way to do this, like, it scared me when I first started to look at this. The best way to get started with this is to use Drupal console. If you install Drupal console, you can run a utility that has the scaffolding that will take you through like a wizard to prompt you how to build the custom entity, and it generates all the code for you, all the base code. Then you can go in and customize the fields that you want in it. But then, so you can say, hey, I want to have forms with this. I want this to have revisions, and I want this and that, and it will build out the code. So then you got something that works, and then you can kind of get a sense and go in and look at it. And then once you do that, you see, oh, I see how this thing is put together, and then you can customize it from that way forward. So when I implemented it right now, I have it when you come in to look at from the admin UI and you click on structure, you see the custom entity listed there, and there's also a view, so you can actually go and view the data that's in that custom entity. So like
that's actually one of the big things missing from paragraphs right now. There's no built-in way to delete paragraphs.
Right.
There's no built-in way to view them.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the bigger shortcomings I think that exists there.
I also imagine
I might convert these.
I also imagine that the custom entity is closer to core, right, than paragraphs. And I've had issues, especially if you're looking at translation with this site in the future. I've had issues with paragraphs and translation and on paragraph module updates. So with a custom entity, you kind of avoid that whole scenario.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was going to mention when Nick was talking about paragraphs earlier. Not that I have anything against paragraphs. I've used them and I like them. But the closer you can take any project to core and away from custom stuff, the better you are long term. Because when there's changes to translation and stuff, those things that in core are going to get addressed. Paragraphs is better because it's using the NTT API. So it's not like a completely weird thing. But it's the closer you can get to core always, the better you are.
Yeah, I mean, if I can get rid of entity revisions, then I'd be happy. I think that module I think that's the module that causes the problems generally more than paragraphs itself. But I'll have to look at it. I mean, I think paragraphs was great in this situation, even just to prototype what I was doing. But if it's as straightforward as you're saying, then I'll have to take a second look at it.
It's so straightforward. I had it completely up and running in less than a day and a half. So if that gives you any measure on how complicated it is. So, hey, if you have any questions or feedback on today's show or any other shows, you can always reach out to us on Twitter at Talking Drupal. You can also email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. We do have a newsletter, and you can sign up for that at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you to all our patrons for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. Shortly after we introduced Patreon, Saul signed up for the highest level. Thank you, Saul. Aaron also recently joined, and thanks to Chris, Patrick, and Peter. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose the Become a Patron button. Patrons also get a full, raw, unedited version of the show that includes the pre-show and any post-show,
which is always super entertaining. So,
or not,
especially when John unplugs his headset and doesn't realize,
or when I turn my volume down and can't hear anything. So, in closing, Stephen, where can people find you and talk more about custom entities?
You can always, best way to reach me is on Twitter at Stephen Kress with a PH.
And Nick, what about you?
You can find me online pretty much everywhere at Nixman, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me at John Picozzi on all the major social networks, and you can find out about Oomph at oomphinc.com.
See ya.
Bye.
See you guys next week.
Guys. Yep. All right, guys. That was great.